By the way, we brought you on here today for many different reasons. One of them was to talk about Bitcoin. We got the
Get
chart
closer
up
to your
here.
mic, bro.
We got the chart up here on Bitcoin, Jake, and that's one of the things that I think everybody wants to hear you talk about a little bit. It's been had a historic run, and we've been analyzing it day by day by day by day as it's been going. It's gotten back into the consciousness of traders and investors alike. It was kind of off the table there for a while. I know you've been a long-term Bitcoin person. We've had you on the podcast many times. Can you do a quick tutorial for anybody who's brand new, maybe listening for the first time? What is Bitcoin? How do you trade it?
Yeah, we could talk about let me ask the chat. How many of us here in the chat are owners or traders of the coins? Any coins, digital coins, cryptocurrency in general. I'm just curious. I kind of
All
want
right,
to take
so
a head count.
all right, have you ever traded Bitcoin, owned Bitcoin, or any other cryptocurrency? Yes, in chat. No, if you have not. Just
Or
so
even
Jake
know what
can,
it is.
yeah, just so Jake can,
I'm
get an
curious.
understanding of it.
Yeah. Get some engagement, get some
Yeah, and there
people in the
is a little
chat.
bit of a 15 to 30-second lag there, Jake, in the
Okay.
chat. So
Well, then
just,
I'll just start talking, and
yeah,
then
just start
yeah,
talking.
those answers are
Yeah,
coming. All
yeah.
right. Well, it's interesting because I think like the original thesis of what it was meant to be is not what it's turning into, and we're watching it in real time, right? So it's very interesting to watch that dynamic unfold, right? If you go back to the creation of the internet, so really high level right now for those that, let's say you've never heard of it at all. um it was the idea of internet money. Like, for a long time, the internet solved everything in terms of the information superhighway. We could do a lot on the internet. The problem we never figured out for years was how to make internet money. How do we actually just use money over the internet that isn't the US dollar, that isn't using my credit card? Like, we've had to go through these other more archaic processes to transfer value, right? And some really smart people got together and used cryptography, or a form of encryption, to create a secure way that we all agreed upon that we could transact value. And that idea, there was a bunch of different projects that led up prior to Bitcoin, but Bitcoin was like the first major one that put all these ideas together in a very articulate way that we all said, wow, this is really something that has legs. And that was back in '09. Right. And I love the kind of whole history behind it, and how it's kind of anonymous in its creation. We don't know who made it, Satoshi Nakamoto, but essentially the idea was digital cash. Cash is easy, cash is simple. It's a piece of paper I can hand to M, and I hand her $100 bill. It's free. There's no transaction fee, so to speak. It's fast, it's secure. I know it got to her. And it's very easy, clean, and simple. How can we do that over the internet? And that was what Bitcoin solved. And the true, I would say, marvel is the accounting processes that we started to utilize to solve the double spending problem. Because the problem with digital stuff is, how do you know it's not counterfeit?
Yeah.
Counterfeiting cash is a big problem they're trying to solve. We constantly make new bills, right? Like new security features. Here's the strip. Here's the watermark. Here's the, like, just to try to stay ahead of people who counterfeit that. How do you make sure that they're not counterfeiting ones and zeros? Because that's all digital is, right? Everything in your
Yeah.
computer is just ones and zeros. How do you make sure that that's not going to happen? Well, what they decided to do was create a big open ledger. They said the way that you make sure that there's no counterfeit is to let everybody in the world all know in real time how much everybody else has. It's kind of a remarkable idea. If you can account for everything at all times, you know the entire ecosystem and where all the money is, you can kind of get updated. Hey, I sent money from here, it goes over there, right? So it's really it was pretty ingenious, I would say, with their solution. And the idea was to create a payment network that cut out the middleman. Why use banks? I've been picking up some more properties here recently. There's a few deals out there in the market, not many, but there's a few. And every time I wire money, Wells Fargo charges me $35 and it pisses me off. I can't tell you how. I'm like, why? Why does it have to be so expensive just to move money? It doesn't make sense to me, right? We've been doing this for years. Why can't it just be a clean, simple? You move it, charge me $2, right? But of course not. They got to be greedy and they got to charge the prices they charge. Whatever. We have to work inside that system. why not use something like Bitcoin? And that's what we're starting to see more and more of now. I will say that people have tried to reinvent the wheel a million times, and that's the problem with cryptocurrency. Instead of putting all of our development teams and all of our support behind a singular project, what everybody's been doing is trying to create and reinvent the wheel. Well, I have a better wheel, it's oval shaped or whatever, and they're trying to constantly make the new thing. And what it's turning into is not really that digital cash that people would have thought it would have been. Bitcoin has a systematic or fundamental flaw in that it can only handle about 4.6 transactions a second. It's not a lot.
No,
right?
no.
Compare that to Visa, right? Visa is having tens of thousands, right? Like 60,000 plus transactions a day, right? And here in Bitcoin, it's very, very small. What I'm seeing right now in the marketplace is the average transaction is over $110,000. We are transacting currently just under $500,000 a second in Bitcoin. That's the current up-to-date numbers, right? It's like $490,000 a second of money movement. It's bigger money moving without needing to use the banks is the true kind of utilization that we're seeing right now in the marketplace, right? It's bigger money, kind of in my estimation, using it like gold has been used in the past for transactional value. I don't want to talk about store of wealth, but big institutions for years have used gold as an agree upon middle transaction in international exchange. Right? And I think it's a digital form of that, so to speak, that enough people are agreeing upon and utilizing.
So the transaction counts and also the amount is getting bigger. One of the things about like 5-7 years ago, people were speculating that Bitcoin be used a lot for consumer transactions, and that just hasn't come to fruition, Jake. Whatever it is we want to see this as, it is not to buy a slice of pizza, right? That's not what people are using their Bitcoin to do.
It won't be. The cost is too high. The average transaction fee is $7.50. Actually, $7.41. That's the average fee to transact with Bitcoin. Now, it's cheaper than the $35 I pay to wire money, sure, but it's not free. I'm not going to buy a $3 coffee and spend $7 in fees. That's not going to make sense.
Well, what do we spend in comparison when we swipe a card?
The average transaction, credit card transaction in America is a $66 transaction. The average cash transaction in America is $17, and the average debit card transaction in America is $42.
Okay, so in terms of those debit card and credit card transactions, we certainly pay a fee on that. We don't pay $7.50 though.
No, exactly. So scalability, hey, if I'm spending $40 and I spend 40 cents, and I'm not saying that's the exact amount, but I'm saying scale-wise, that's fine. If I'm moving $100,000 and I spend $7, that's fine.
Not an issue.
Yeah, it's again a non-issue.
But if I'm buying a cup of coffee at Starbucks, I'm still going to use my American Express card.
Right.
No doubt. 100%. Yeah. 100%.
So the current role in the market on Bitcoin.
So real quick, Tim. So as the consumer, because that was a big argument early on in Bitcoin, is consumer adoption. That obviously has not happened, right? Because of what Jake is talking about. In terms of that bullish thesis, Jake, do the bulls on Bitcoin even concern themselves with the consumers anymore? Or is it all institutional based?
I actually think it's institutional, but also it's international. So the American consumer, like I was researching some stuff on who's using Bitcoin, right? Like who's actually the people going around, and one of the best infographics and statistics that I could find was from last year, so it's a little dated. I understand that, but it said that of the respondents, only about 5% of U.S. respondents had interacted with the coins in general, right? So used them, traded them, invested in them, so to speak. Internationally, Turkey, 20% of their population. Brazil, 18% of their population. Colombia, 18% of their population. Argentina, 16% of their population.
Do you know what it is in the U.S.?
5%. At the time of those,
internationally, it's far more popular even in 2020 than it is in the U.S.
For sure. I mean, even last 2 weeks ago, the Venezuela army created their own mining operation. They created their own Bitcoin mining farm in order to try and create income and circumvent the U.S. sanctions. Like everybody around the world is finding creative.
We'll see how the U.S. responds to that one.
Well, and how do they though?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a difficult thing to respond to because they don't have control over it, and that's the appeal, right? The appeal is that not one organization has the power.
The U.S. would just put oil sanctions. I mean, that's what the U.S. is going to do. The U.S. is going to be like, I don't know what Bitcoin is yet, so let's just do oil sanctions.
Yeah, that could totally be the case. But what we're seeing is I think a viewed thing that people are using to transfer value, but in a larger scale than maybe previously thought. It's not the day-to-day transactions that I think Bitcoin is really going to be used for. It's going to be those, hey, I want to send a huge amount overseas type deal.
I got a question for you on everything you've been talking about, because you talk about the percentage of people that utilize this currency, right? And obviously it has not been mass adopted by consumers, especially in the United States. I do agree with you internationally. When I've traveled internationally, Jake, Bitcoin was like talking Apple. Like, honestly, it was like talking anything else. When I used to talk about Bitcoin in seminars, people would, like in the US, their eyes would be like, what is this dude and who is he? What is he talking about? I just want to know about my General Electric stock, right? Whereas when I went internationally, it was like, what do you think of Bitcoin? What do you think? It wasn't just that, Jake. It was people coming up and pitching me on investing in their version of whatever crypto junk currency they were doing, right? Internationally, it was very, very utilized, far more than it was utilized in the US. But you still talk about these numbers being 18%, 22%, 17%, 15%, US 5%. And my question is this: as we're approaching this 20,000 barrier in Bitcoin, we're talking about it at an all-time high here, and we're talking about it being at an all-time high, not over a 10-year stretch of market cycle history, but literally in the last 2.5 months, right? And just seeing massive price appreciation here. And there's a lot of belief out there in the market that we are overextended, overvalued. This is crazy, can't last, whatever it is, right? And a lot of those statements are based on ignorance of simply not understanding what this is. But when I think about Bitcoin at 20,000, and I'm thinking about it as a number, 20,000, that number just simply makes people believe this is overvalued, just simply because of how they see the number 20,000. What they don't realize a lot of times is that 20,000 is just price per coin, and this isn't a per coin type option. This is fractional, number one. And number two, what is the current market cap of Bitcoin, Jake?
Total it's like market cap. 330 something like that.
Yeah, it's like mid 300s, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you think about it like that at $20,000, it has a market cap of in the 330 billion, and then we think about Apple. What's just Apple? And it's a big company, obviously, but it's a $2 trillion company. Google, $1.3 trillion company. Amazon, $1.8 trillion company. I mean, my God, Tesla is a $650 billion company. And when you think about it like that, and then think about it from a oil perspective, how much oil is out there on a daily basis in terms of total percentage of dollars? Like, we're talking trillions upon trillions of dollars here. How much currency, US dollar currency, is in existence right now? $15 trillion within the US itself, another 33 trillion outside the US. What about debt out there? We're talking up to $220 trillion in unfunded debt liabilities out there. And so when you think about this from an economic perspective, macro perspective, when you compare it against Apple, when you compare it against Google, when you compare it against Tesla, you don't have that same philosophy of, oh my God, Bitcoin $20,000, that is so overextended. And no, it's not actually, when you think about the fundamental nature of it, especially right now when you're only talking about 5% of the US in terms of adoption, mid-teens in the international in adoption. And then all of a sudden today you're talking about corporate adoption, institutional adoption, central bank adoption, all of these other things. And we're still very, very early in the history of Bitcoin. We're still only talking about a technology that is very, very new from a historical perspective. I get it. In our lifetimes, this has now been around for 10 years, and that seems like a very, very, very long time. I want to remind people the British pound has been around for about 1,000 years now. Okay, the U.S. dollar in different editions have been around for a couple hundred years now, and so we're still very, very, very new into this discussion of adoption. I don't believe, like, for example, if this was a stock, guys, they would have already split 10 times. Mm-hmm. They would have already split. And so you'd be seeing this price. It would still have the 330 billion market cap. But if it would have split 10 times, you're looking at Bitcoin at $200. And you would have been like, oh, man, it's a buy at $200, when really the numbers, nothing's different.
But, and like you talked about, though, that fractional way that we trade it as cryptocurrency traders, I mean, we're already aware you don't have to pay 19,000 for a coin, and you can only buy one coin, right?
My point is beyond that, though. Yeah. My point is beyond that. It's how we, not just consumers, but we traders, make these emotional decisions because of how we see a simple number. Mm-hmm. And that number at $20,000, a consumer looks at that and they're like, 20,000? Can it really go to 30? Yeah. Can a stock go from 20 to 30? The answer would be yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. Especially when put some, you're talking about emotions for a second. As soon as you break out to all-time highs, you have that phenomenon that everybody's a genius. Doesn't matter when you bought.
Oh, everybody's a genius right now.
Old-time peaks, of, I was the worst time to purchase a Bitcoin in my whole life. You break out to all-time highs, you're still profitable, right? Okay, so suddenly everybody's a lot happier.
All right. So with that said, Jake, give me the argument above 20,000 here, because 20,000 is that significant whole number. It represents the all-time high in Bitcoin. I think it was like 20,500 in the futures market, but it's in that ballpark, that 20,000. It's what everybody, like Tim, how many times have we talked about Bitcoin at 20,000 in the last 2 months?
I mean, we've been eyeing it. You even talked about that as a target on the last breakout. I think pretty much every time we talk about Bitcoin.
I said, like, literally, Jake, I was like, okay, the breakout of 10, the breakout of 11, it's going to 14. The breakout of 14, nothing's there until 16. When it gets above 16, nothing's there above 20. That's been the analysis, pinpoint for months now. And that's not just tackle trading, guys. Everybody's talking about Bitcoin at $20,000, right? Mm-hmm. This has not been hard analysis in any capacity from a technical perspective. Bitcoin technically right now, there has never been I'm not talking about today, I'm talking about a couple months ago. There was, and I said this live in the halftime show, there's never been a better technical scenario in Bitcoin's history. And I wasn't just talking about the futures market. I'm talking about Bitcoin's history. And so everybody has been talking about Bitcoin at 20,000. We're sitting there, 19,230. We tested above 20,000 yesterday. Jake, give me the argument of price appreciation above 20,000.
There's no previous ceilings to work off of. I mean, if you look at the previous runs, 2017, you ran from 1,000 up to 20K. You had a 20x 1 year run, so to speak. You go prior to that in like 2012, 2013, you're like 100 up to like 1,300. Like you're talking about a 10x run, so to speak. So even if you look at just one of those smaller type of bullish runs, you go from 3,000 a coin, you 10x it, you go to 30,000. It's not out of, I would say, the personality, not outside the scope of the personality of the product set necessarily. And on top of that too, I was reading an article that it was published a couple hours ago by a statistician that was saying that the average buy-in price for the current market on Bitcoin is like 7,500. Yeah, that's where the average buy-in is currently is. So everybody's a genius right now, right? We're all raking in profit, and greed starts to set in, right? Mm-hmm. We all get really excited and really emotional. I'm, if we break out significantly above, I haven't bought in this recent rally very much, but I'll buy as soon as it breaks and holds above 20K. for sure, no doubt. You know, I'll add to my position, whereas
Yeah.
before I was just letting profits run.
So you're actually, because you have been locking in profit as the price has been going up, correct?
Yeah.
But you're actually now looking at saying, okay, I love this so much above 20K. I'm looking to add above 20K.
I'm willing to add risk, because years I've been taking risk off the table. Years, right? Like I don't think I've actually added much to my Bitcoin since the profit taking of 2017.
You were very early adopter in Bitcoin.
Yeah, but I had too much money in Bitcoin. I started taking all that money and throwing it in gold and silver, and now I had too much of that, or whatever, right? But I think as something that has such a fundamental argument to the fact that if we're getting large scale, big money adoption, right? Like the average size is 100K plus. This is not your typical mom and pop that's using and transacting in Bitcoin right now, right? This is very big money. And there's only going to be 21 million coins in circulation ever. And we've already lost a lot of those coins, by the way. They've been destroyed, lost. The passwords to the wallets have been kind of, I don't know, disappeared over
Peter
time.
Schiff famously lost his.
Yeah, there's a ton of that. So there's actually a much smaller universe than that. And what I'm also watching simultaneously within the last couple of weeks is companies like, for example, PayPal entering the space and using Bitcoin as I would say a marketing lead, so to speak, where they're trying to increase adoption of their platform and just utilization of their products as a whole by allowing people to use cryptocurrencies on that platform. And it's becoming way easier for the average person to interact with. One of the biggest issues I've had for years has been the complexity. You know, why does this have to be so, like, you've had to be like a computer scientist or a computer engineer, or have that kind of desire to want to learn that stuff, to dig into it and truly understand what the mechanics are behind it, how does it function, what's really going on, because it's kind of it's very technical, right? Cryptography was a very small universe prior to Bitcoin. I didn't even know what cryptography was and all of the mechanics of how all of that worked. Now I have a reason to study it, obviously, tied to value that I care about. But I'm finding it easier. And I've said for a long time, I've said that there's a few fundamental things and hurdles for the coin to overcome it, all coins in general to overcome. And one of them has been the complexity. One has been ease of use. You know, the average American, the average consumer needs a email and an easy to remember password, log in, one button click send type of functionality for them to truly be 100% adopters. And it just hasn't been there.
That being said, though, there are platforms that make it easier for people to purchase, than others. I know that recently there's been a lot of popularity into like these ancillary products that kind of represent Bitcoin, or companies that even like within their stock or whatnot, people are trading them because it gives them a little Bitcoin exposure. If people are out there and they're like, okay, I've listened to you guys talk about this for a long time. I'm excited. I'm interested in the breakout at 20,000. I just don't know how to trade it. I mean, what do you say to those people who have relied on some of those products, Jake? And would you tell them just go get a specific kind of open account and play it directly? Like, how do you deal with that?
I think that's partly the investor preference. So I'm the type of individual that I like the cleanest exposure possible, is the way I like to put it. I like to get closest to the asset in question as possible. Instead of going and buying a REIT, I prefer to buy a real house. Instead of buying GLD, a gold tracking ETF, I prefer to own the physical bar. Instead of owning a Bitcoin trust, I prefer to own the actual coins. And now I won't say that's right. I'd say that's my preference.
Let's talk about that for just 1 second, because Grayscale Bitcoin Trust is probably the number one way a lot of normal people get access to Bitcoin, right? And I think a lot of them believe they're probably buying actually into Bitcoin here, which they're not, but I think they have that belief, right? I have some concerns with GBTC that I don't have specifically on BTC, right? Do you have any concerns with people investing in this product as an avenue to get into Bitcoin?
Not, I mean, I have the same concerns about GLD. They're unfounded, but I still have them. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I prefer, like, they tell me the gold's there. Is it really there? Like, that's how
you you want to
I
go
don't know if
inspect.
I'm,
You want to go inspect it. Yeah.
like, I don't know. Like, the world's a
They
crazy place. There's a lot of
they
shitty
they are
people.
regulated by the SEC.
Sure, and so is a lot of other corrupt people that have done a lot of market manipulation over the
I
years,
I
right? You go
agree
down
with
the
that.
list.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's bad. So I don't want to say it's a poor way to gain exposure, especially like say you have an IRA and that's where your capital is located, and you don't necessarily have the capital required to trade the futures contract because it is a little bit heavy in terms of its size in comparison to probably where a lot of people's capital lies. I think this is a great way. It's a very cheap, easy exposure into the coin. But I would actually challenge people and say, hey, if you really want to be in this, truly learn about it. I mean, just downloading a quick Coinbase app or getting into the actual coins, you're going to learn a lot through the process of just like how I tell people, if you want to be a real estate investor, go buy a house. I mean, shit, walking through that process
Yeah.
of, I mean, actually going and closing at a title company and trying to find a tenant or flipping a house or whatever you're going to do with it, you're going to learn so much walking through that process that I think there's value in the education aside from the investment returns. You just won't get that in a product like this, right? It'll be the asset appreciation, but it won't have any of the education.
One thing especially with GBTC, I just feel it needs to be said that you're not actually investing in Bitcoin. You're investing in a company that invests in Bitcoin, very similar to an ETF, but there is some distinctions. I just don't want people to think they're getting inflationary protection here because I just don't believe that safe haven asset class. Let me put it like this. I don't believe safe haven asset class feel the need to go on CNBC and spend millions of dollars in marketing. And that's what Greystone Bitcoin Trust does. They go on CNBC and they spend buku bucks marketing GBTC. And then they bring on a lot of analysts that are pro Bitcoin, pro GBTC. If it's a true safe haven, you don't need to do that. And so I don't want people to think they're getting safe haven here when this is not how safe haven asset classes behave.
There's some smoke here. There's some red flags for you, but
yeah.
But
I think it might just be a little early because I think there's also a huge educational gap where
I do too.
Who the heck knows what it is? So I actually think that it's going to take people like that trust marketing to get people to even learn about it. I mean, the average American's lazy, bro. Like, I mean, like you're not like what are they gonna do? Like they're gonna be sitting there like, oh, I can't just send it from my checking account. What do you mean? Like I have to click a different button? Like, dude, how many people?
No,
we said like you have
you.
to learn how to trade, and we just ask them to learn a very simple software. They're like, I can't be bothered. I'm
no,
gonna let my guy handle it.
I'm with you 100% on everything you just said. Again, I think at the end of the day, you still got to treat this as a speculative asset class, and you got to position size accordingly, in my opinion. Now, others would
That's the key.
fundamentally disagree with me, right? They would feel like, no, I want to focus on this, and I'm going to because I believe in it, and I understand that, I do. But if you don't have that belief and that conviction and that education, I truly believe you got to treat this as like any other very speculative asset class.
Well, it still is. I mean, to me, it's the big, it's the home run hit, right? It's the straight down the line fastball, and you have to swing because you'd be crazy not to.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
You're also having to understand that when you swing that hard in order to try to hit a homer, you strike out a lot, right?
I agree.
So I think it's like for me, it's only 3-4% of like talk about total accumulated net worth type of situation. It's only a few points for me. It's not like it's 20-30% of my assets, but I would be crazy not to have points in it.
Yeah, we do have a couple questions from our community. I do want to ask you very quickly, Jake.
Terrence first.
Terrence first. Terrence was asking a question about Facebook and Libra, and if Libra has any impact on your analysis in Bitcoin.
It's been fun. It's funny because I've had a lot of questions about all the other coins, right? I mean, Ether, second largest coin in the ecosystem, Ripple, third largest coin, and I'm ranking by market cap, that is,
Yeah.
in the ecosystem as a whole. And if you would have asked me in 2017, I was far more excited about everything other than Bitcoin, to be honest. I thought
Yeah.
Bitcoin was the dinosaur that was dying. That was like back a couple years ago, I was like, yeah, who cares about Bitcoin? F
Well,
Bitcoin.
when
It's
you're
all
talking,
about this and that and all these
yeah,
other coins. That is something that could really have legs. But what I found is just over the last couple of years that they've been able to develop, yes, there's more functionality and there's maybe more uses, and even in many regards, they're fundamentally better structured in how the networks are designed. Like honestly, proof of work type architecture that Bitcoin was built off of is super archaic at this point, right? They
yeah,
have such better mechanisms to really do this, but that's not what people are really into right now. Ethereum's still what, 55% off of all-time highs, while Bitcoin's scraping the ceiling. So I mean, as much as all these great ideas were put and brought onto the table, people aren't, and in many regards they could be used so much more and have so much more potential than this old school archaic type coin. That's not what people are utilizing, and that's not what people are getting behind. And what I like to do is I'm a liquidity freak, I call myself that. I like to move within the markets that everybody else is in, right? I have the top 10 most liquid traded products in the market, as one of my biggest watch lists that I go back to time and time again. And I just hammer that list is liquidity. I want to trade what everybody else is trading. And right now, what I'm seeing is everybody's here in this coin and all the other ones are still around, but the adoption and utilization moving
do
forward
you
might not be
think
there.
do you think the institutional arguments that have been very bullish for Bitcoin in the last couple of years has impacted the other coins? Take Ether, for example. Ether's speed and utilization is far superior than
Far superior.
far superior than Bitcoin, but it's not utilized to the same extent. Do you think that's, I mean, do you think that's just the consumer never really adopted it in the US?
Well, let me, for all those that I mean, I want to be respectful for those that are brand new kind of to this
Yeah.
space in general. Ethereum, kind of what we're mentioning, is the second largest kind of coin by market cap in the space.
Yeah.
It was a kind of, I would say, architectural type version 2. It's a proof of stake network, right? Or they're trying to move there, eventually, hopefully, we've been told. But it's a architectural type that's, think about it, instead of just a payment network, it's like a big supercomputer.
Yeah.
It can do 3 times more the transactions per second that Bitcoin can do. It has the ability to use smart contracts, which are far more sophisticated types of transactions, where you say, hey, I'm going to send you an Ether coin and you're going to send me back the deed to a house. It's
Yeah.
not just I send you a coin and you receive a coin and the coin has value. That's what Bitcoin is. That's it. It's like one type of thing happening, where all these other coins, they can do so much more. Like technically, you could build out this type of scenario where all of the public record of property transactions could be held on these kind of blockchains that are cemented in stone, so to speak. A good record that's updated globally that we all have access to, and we could make it very digital, very clean, very sophisticated. There's so much that could be there, and yet what have we really used the technology for? If you think about this for a second, there's so much possibility. What have we really used it for? It was the ICO boom. The big whole craze of trying to create new securities on a deregulated exchange that, in many regards, the scammers used to scam people out of lots of money. I lost money on ICOs. I gave out money on some of my profits. I would write a check for $1,000 to any ICO that would kind of take it. I was like, hey, these are kind of cool. They might be big. Anything that I really believe.
Well, I'll tell you,
I never received anything for those.
I'll tell you,
money
Jay,
gone.
I've personally been approached in 5 different scenarios in the last 5 years to be an early adopter in an altcoin. And they were all based on nothing. There was no actual value to them. They were all just speculative asset classes trying to make a buck. That's all it was. And that was 98% of all the altcoins out there. Like, there were thousands of them at some point. No regulations, no value, didn't understand the technology, and people were just trying to take advantage of the craze that was happening in the ICO market.
And I'm a believer, and this is just my belief, and I don't impose my beliefs on anybody else, but I don't believe in true intrinsic value. I don't believe that anything is actually worth anything. I think it's just all a made-up heebie-jeebie world that we all
You are
agree upon.
speaking Tim's stylist mindset right there.
So, like, why is a house worth $1 million?
We literally live in the Matrix right now. It's all just a computer simulation.
So, but like, think about that framework. Like, why is the yellow colored metal more valuable than the silver colored metal that has a lot more industrial uses? Why? Well, because we all agree. That's it. We all say that we think that that one's more valuable than the other one. And so therefore it is. So I have to work inside of the frameworks of what I would say is the societal beliefs. We all agree that certain things hold more value than others. And right now in society, we're deeming that things like Bitcoin, for example, are more valuable than some of the other coins. And again, being a liquidity freak, I always want to have that ease of exit. I always want to have the ability to move in and out. And because of that, I'm going to stick where everybody else is until that belief changes. And as soon as I see it change, I move with it.
Well, and the transactional value being up above like the $100,000 mark that you said, the average transaction size or some crazy number that you put out there earlier. If you really think about this, the evolution of Bitcoin, and we talked about this on a podcast a couple of months ago, but it's not been what everybody assumed it was going to be 5, 7, 8 years ago. And
they assumed you were going to use Bitcoin to buy a computer.
Well, and we also assumed these other coins, we knew that most of them would fail, the little tiny ones. But I think a lot of people in cryptocurrency, thought Ripple would be a lot bigger than it is, Jake. I remember you and I having conversations, or
same with Ether,
whatever it might be. And Ethereum's worth $67 billion still. I mean, it's not like it's not. Big. It's had a good year.
No, it's still. Hey, listen, Ether's still silver.
Yeah,
Ripple's still palladium. I mean, you listen. You got your top of the market, and that's fine. You just don't care about the bottom of the market, and the bottom of the market in the crypto space is literally 98% of everything else.
Yeah.
It's Ripple, Ether, Light, and Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's 1A above all.
But it's also interesting, and real quick, Tim, that I mean, in my personal investing journey, I started with Bitcoin. I fell out of love with Bitcoin because all the other things were so much more exciting. I started buying Ether at $5 a coin, and that shit started running. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the holy grail, right? Started buying Ripple, started buying Neo, started like all of these other types of things. And as the market developed, I saw not as much adoption, and I've shifted right back to the big blue chips, so to speak.
Yeah. And it does make sense. By the way, one last question here. I've loved the conversation and appreciate all the insight here, Jake. One from Swin here is, Jake, what do you think of blockchain plays like Block and Coin, Koin, or BLOK?
Well, let me talk really quickly about that, Jake, because there's a lot of people in the market that do not believe in the actual coin, but believe in the technology behind the coin. And that argument it goes back to the internet argument, right? I believe in the internet. I just don't believe in all the websites of the internet, i.e. pets.com, right?
Yeah.
So like Amazon became a giant, pets.com went bankrupt, right? Most of those websites that were the juggernauts back in the day, they all went bankrupt and nobody ever knows of them ever again. And so we don't remember the bloodbath of a lot of those websites that died, and and same thing in the crypto market. Okay. So there's a lot of people that believe in the technology. For example, I have a bigger belief in blockchain technology and the impact to society than I do an actual coin. Swin is kind of making that same conversation. So for example, for people like myself, for people like Swin that believe in the technology a little bit more than the individual coin, he talks about, what about Block? Okay. And what about, I believe the other one was Coin, Koin. What about these two plays in Coin and Block? Coin would be the exchanges and whatnot. Is that a way to get access to the technology, invest in the technology behind it instead of taking on the risk to say an individual coin.
Sure. And I mean, it's gonna have some sort of positive correlation to, I would say, the development of the technology and maybe even the price appreciation of these markets. But those ETFs are built, and I wanted to look them up real quick. Like, for example, on Coin, the top 10 holdings are NVIDIA, Taiwanese Semiconductor, PayPal, Microsoft, Amazon, Salesforce, Visa, Intel, MasterCard. Like, yes, all of those companies will have, and all of them are like 4 to 5% of the asset holding. They're going to have some sort of correlation with the increase in the technology, and they will definitely benefit from it. I think that would be a great way to gain some exposure, but I don't know if you'll have the same type of movement. Just because Bitcoin doubles in price doesn't mean NVIDIA does, so to speak, right? So it's going to be a slightly different type of investment. I will say, and I've said this for a long time, that the biggest revolution, I said that before, was the idea that we could have digital money, right? Now think about, and we had this conversation on a podcast, Matt, double entry accounting was revolutionary. Revolutionary. Our entire financial system and marketplace is built upon, predicated on the idea of double entry accounting. We are moving into the age of triple entry, which is what blockchain is. It's the idea that, each party like has their own, and then there's a centralized verifiable source in between, right? Like, this is going to be the way, and it could be, that all asset classes in the future are run off a blockchain. Like, futures contracts, options, stocks could all be held in ownership, transaction records.
Just to give you an example of that, we had somebody that actually did a lot of business with taco trading and a good member of our team. He left us about 1.5 years ago to go literally work on blockchain legal contracts, that all the legal contracts would be stored on the blockchain. So, I mean, this is not something just for a financial perspective. And that's why a lot of people believe in the blockchain argument, even more so than the actual crypto argument.
Yeah. But then again, okay, so that technology is going to be revolutionary. Every bank could have their own internalized network, right? That they hold all their records and transactions with. Every corporation, every public type of system for, legal, for residential real estate, for everything could have their own blockchain network. The question becomes, how do you make money off of that, though? Because if the technology booms, maybe some of the companies that build that technology can obviously boom. And maybe these like Coin, for example, which had all those asset holdings I mentioned, or even Block, that actually in some regards has, I think, a better kind of correlation to the Bitcoin price, because of the holdings they have, can gain some upside momentum from that, but doesn't mean they will. Right? Just because Amazon goes out and builds a new data center, and Amazon hosts, for example, hypothetically, blockchain network that any corporation can easily plug into. It's kind of like AWS, right? That they could kind of host and do things for them. Does that mean that the whole company skyrockets in value? Maybe, possibly, and maybe it's just a new part of their entire business. And you would have just done well owning that stock for other reasons anyways. Like, I already own most of those companies I mentioned. Inside of those, I own Amazon, I own Taiwanese Semiconductor, I own Microsoft, I own, like, so
Well, like when I brought up Coin here, the only thing I'll say is I kind of like to break out on the weekly chart.
It's a beautiful chart.
I just want to say thanks to Swin for bringing it up, because that looks like a really good breakout on the weekly chart. So thank you there, Swin, for that one. Jabalka has a question. If I were to build a server farm to mine coins, is that still a good move in 2021? We do know the cost has increased in that. Can that still be a profitable business opportunity for people in the actual direct mining community?
That's a good question. I don't have I would say, a very good 2020 answer for you. I could, if I get on the phone in about an hour, have some numbers that would give us like, okay, what exactly is the mining business looking like? But I can speak to when I was mining back in 17. And one of the things that helped miners, and it will be same here right now, is price appreciation. You made more money off price appreciation than anything else, right?
Yeah.
And that was almost needed in order to sustain the market. And as this technology has developed, more people got into it, started buying in big and heavy. I do believe the mom and pop op is done. Like I don't think you can just go out there and number one, you got to be able to get the mining infrastructure, which good luck getting that, right? Especially with Bitcoin running right now. Oh, good luck, right? You're fighting everybody else in the world to try to get some.
And when you talk everybody, you're talking massive server farms too.
But also the whole world. Like I just told you, Venezuela's army is trying to build a server farm. So you're competing with governments. You're competing with big corporations and big money in order to try and build out a small mining operation. And on top of that, the problem in America is energy cost. I mean, if you have solar panels and you have free energy, maybe. My uncle, he has a gas well on his property. There is a big 100+ acre farm, and he has a gas well that he leases to a gas company, and he gets like a ton of free gas because he owns the mineral rights on the land. Now, somebody like that, I could say, hey, set up a generator, gas powered, you have free electricity, run a miner, and it's probably profitable. The average American spending 13, 14, 15 cents a kilowatt, they're not going to be able to compete with people overseas like China or other places that can get a lot dirtier energy and have it at dirt cheap prices. You will not stay in as long as they can. And I think I would say good luck with that type of business model.
Yeah. I agree with that. And Jake, so thank you so much for coming on to talk all things crypto and Bitcoin. I'm sure our community really enjoyed it. I know myself, anytime you come on talk crypto, I always learn something new, Jake, and I love your numbers and your detail and your data. So thank you so much. And for those of you who want a little bit more Bitcoin conversation, a little bit more Jake in their lives, we are going to be bringing Jake on to the podcast, Trading Justice Podcast, next Monday to give an update on all things crypto.